I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. This is the greatest thrill of my life. I'm king of the world. Woohoo! Woohoo!
Hey Sunny Gyms, this video is sponsored by Raycon, so to find out how you can get 15% off your next order, make sure to stick around for the end of the video. Catwoman, the movie, the game, is one of the worst things ever made by another human being since the invention of mustard gas. Developed by Argonaut Games, responsible for the brutally hardcore Alien Resurrection on the PlayStation 1, and it's an adaptation of the infamous Halle Berry film.
No!
Released for Microsoft Windows, the PlayStation 2, GameCube and Xbox, which is the one I'll be playing. And there was even a version made for the Game Boy of all things.
Here's the story.
To start with, how's this for a scary thought? There was a time when superhero films weren't always a sure thing. Don't get me wrong, movies like Blade 1 and 2, Batman Begins and Spider-Man 1 and 2 were all awesome, but before films like The Dark Knight and Iron Man came along and people actually started to take comic book movies seriously, we also had a pretty bad run with things like Spawn, Fantastic Four, and case in point, Catwoman. So, unsurprisingly, what was one of the worst movies of all time hasn't carried across all that well into video game format. And I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that it's truly one of the worst things that I've ever played.
No, not again!
Yeah, that's right, I suffered through this thing just to make this video. Don't ever say don't do anything for you guys. But I almost kind of started to think that maybe this was done ironically. I mean, Argonaut Games made a pretty sadistic shooter with Alien Resurrection, so maybe that's their whole modus operandi. Maybe they just like making the most painful games possible to see people suffer. Or maybe they made this game as dreadful as the movie is to ensure that it was completely faithful. Either way, I'd say that they should go to jail for this, but it seems this was the last game they ever worked on, and that starts to make a whole lot of sense the further you get into this thing. Now, the rumours are that Argonaut were given an early draft of the film script to work off here, which makes it an even more bizarre little spin-off that I really doubt anyone was ever pining for. I haven't seen the movie since I saw it in the theatre as a teenager. I was going to re-watch it in preparation for this video, but look, even I have my limits.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
But as far as I can remember, the story here somewhat follows the same plot. You're playing as Halle Berry's character Patience Phillips, working for a cosmetics company that's about to ship some kind of anti-aging cream that has some potentially fatal side effects. Patience tries to escape after finding this out, but ends up getting drowned, lol, before being revived by her cat, which then gives her superpowers. Yeah, that's basically the ultimate fantasy for every spinster that lives on Tumblr.
Rise from your grave.
These powers just basically seem to be the ability to kinda jump higher, and also hit things a little bit harder. From that point on, the entire game is about trying to find out what the cosmetic company were up to, moving through a grand total of 5 different levels as you try to figure that out. Plus, along the way you'll be tracked down by a detective who kind of looks a lot like Bruce from Resident Evil Dead Aim.
Catwoman, this is Detective Lone, Metro Police.
What does that mean?
Now in fairness, while this does look pretty bad the majority of the time here, there are some half-decent looking environments. I do think some of the lighting and the shadow effects look pretty good, and there's some artistic looking areas here and there. I really like that level set inside the nightclub, where you've got all these different coloured lights shining in from the nearby dance floor. They've even got those Gamer Girl hexagonal LEDs plastered all over the walls. And just like most real life nightclubs, as soon as I got inside, all I wanted to do was leave and go home, so that level of realism there is incredible. There's also other subtle visual effects, like you can see puddles of water in certain areas, and there's other surfaces which have real-time reflections, which, again, I have to admit, does look decent. NPCs, though, on the other hand, just look bad. Like, check out the neck on this lady, for instance. Yeah, she might want to check in with a chiropractor to get that thing looked at. Catwoman, on the other hand, at least looks passable, only there's this kind of weird rim lighting effect around her almost constantly. I think it's been done to make it easier to see her during combat, but it just doesn't look right. You can see it the worst in some of the cinematics, and it just kind of looks odd. I mean, it's a light coming from a light source that doesn't even exist. So overall, for a 2004 Xbox game, this ain't exactly stellar. I mean, compare it to something like the original Halo, which came out a few years prior, and it looks like absolute dog shit in comparison. Shit from a dog. And I mean, it's just a bit weird to me considering that these are the guys who made Alien Resurrection, which was a game that really pushed the PlayStation 1 to its absolute limits. And yet now we've got Catwoman, which just kind of feels like it's settled for mediocrity. It doesn't even support 480p, which is even weirder considering there's really only a handful of games for the Xbox that got gimped in that way. On top of all of that, literally, there's this weird kind of blurry filter that they've used during certain areas, which just makes the game look even worse. It's like trying to see the world through glasses that are covered in cooking oil. Halle Berry doesn't do the voice of Catwoman here either, which might have been a good thing, considering it would have just been the second least embarrassing Catwoman role she ever took.
Thank you, guys.
I think what they've done here is pull some of her lines from the film, but for most of the dialogue, she's instead been voiced by Jennifer Hale. I met Jennifer once at a convention in Sydney, and she's the nicest lady ever. Not to mention, she looks damn good for her age.
Prove it.
And I'm sorry, Jennifer, but you deserve so much better.
Not for long.
Still though, she kinda does the best you could expect with the material, considering it sounds like the only direction she's been given is to just sound like she's talking on a phone sex line.
Hey there, big boy. Let's dance.
When I went looking on IMDb to see who else has worked on this thing, well, check out this little nugget I found too. Yeah, Jeremy Renner voicing the cops. Not a high point in this dude's career, I'm sure. One of the main saving graces this thing has is that it's not a particularly long game. You can easily finish it in about 3 to 4 hours, but a majority of that time is going to be spent wondering what the hell you're supposed to be doing. Now there's 5 levels in the game, with each level then being broken down into 2 chapters, apart from the final level, which is mercifully only just 1, thank God. The game starts off with a really short prologue / tutorial, which teaches you the bare minimum mechanics in the game. Then you're in the first real main mission, moving through back alleys and trying to find your lost cat Midnight. Following its pheromones, which are only visible through a special vision mode, because yeah, that's the kind of thing I love to do in my superhero games, ain't it? Spend all my time following the vapors left behind by a cat's ass. Anyway, it won't take too long playing this thing before you'll notice that it has a pretty heavy focus on platforming. In fact, I'd say that ratio of platforming to, well, everything else is basically 70 to 30. And this might be fine, except this game really does have some of the most god-awful controls of all time. And how ironic too, a game where you play as a character named Patience is really pushing mine to the goddamn limit. Bullshit! This is one of those platforming games where it's kind of hard to figure out what the game expects of you at times, but then even once you've figured that out, it often still doesn't work because of just how inconsistent the controls are. I mean, for starters, you'd think you press the A button to jump, because, I don't know, that's pretty much the case for most games made on the Xbox, but instead, it's the right trigger, and to crouch, you press the left trigger. And even if that's not too bad, well, how about this? This is a 3D platforming game that doesn't give you manual camera control. Instead, it essentially has fixed camera perspectives, and I honestly can't think of the last time I played a 3D platformer that didn't let me control where the camera was aiming. What this means is that a lot of the time you don't even really know what's coming ahead of you because the camera hasn't spun around yet to show you. And even then, when the camera does spin around, it completely changes the direction you need to move that thumbstick, just throwing your trajectory off entirely. More annoying than that though is where you've got to jump from moving platform to moving platform and not being able to maneuver the camera in a way which lets you better see the distance you're trying to clear is just so infuriating. And I just don't know why they did this. Like, was it a way to try to make the game more cinematic or something, keeping it in line with its theatrical counterpart? Or was it just stubbornness and laziness on the part of the developer? It's even worse during some of the chase sequences. Now, when I say chase sequences, it's really just you having to be on the run constantly as people are trying to shoot at you. The game has one of these sequences really early on where the police just start fucking shooting at you from a chopper. Because I guess that's standard police procedure or something, is to immediately open fire on someone who's standing around on a rooftop. Later on in the game, there's an entire level where this is going on, and at times, you're pretty much just expected to make leaps of faith when you come to a gap. I don't know, just hope you'll find a good landing. You can't even use your first person mode here to try to scout ahead, because every time you go into this mode, you take an instant hit from this sniper that's shooting at you, because, yeah, that's fair. And can I also say too how long this sequence goes on for? I mean look, being chased by something is fine if the whole thing is short. If it's like a 2 or 3 minute long adrenaline surge, where something big and nasty's coming after you, well then that's fine. But this part goes on for 10 to 15 minutes and it just becomes tedious very quickly. But look, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm already jumping to the second last level when we've got so much more to talk about.
Not for long.
What was I saying before? Yeah, the platforming sucks.
Bullshit!
Now look, I like to think I'm pretty decent at most video games. I'll admit that I'm terrible at fighting games, RTS, sports, and racing sims, but I grew up playing 8 and 16-bit games, and I spent a lot of time with things like the Crash Bandicoot series. My ass may be dumb, but I'm no dumbass, alright? Even still though, the amount of times I'd screw up these platforming sections was just too many to count. But the thing is that it almost never felt like it was my fault. In an almost archaic way too, a lot of these sections are going to drop you stories below if you mess up again, forcing you to go back through them time and time again.
NANI?!
On a positive note, the list of moves is admittedly pretty varied. You can climb and run up walls, you can vault off them to grab other surfaces, you can climb up fences, you can swing from poles like your mum does, and even use your whip as a makeshift grapple. But it just all seldom comes together in a cohesive way, and that constant handicap of not being able to see ahead in the way you'd really like just results in lots of trial and error. You can use Catwoman's first-person vision mode to highlight the way forward, which is kind of helpful sometimes, but even still, I had to use a walkthrough for a fair chunk of this game because it is just really unclear how to progress sometimes. Yeah, just process that for a second. I had to use a walkthrough for a Catwoman game. I mean, how embarrassing.
You are one pathetic loser.
There was one time I was reading the walkthrough trying to figure out where to go next, and then suddenly the game started showing me this slideshow of Catwoman as she started pulling off the same 3 or 4 poses over and over. And you can tell that they put a lot of effort into this, modeling how she looks and moves. It's just a bit of a shame they didn't put the same amount of energy into making sure the platforming wasn't complete shit. I did find the platforming getting easier as I got further into the game, I guess just because I was becoming more familiar with the controls, but smooth and polished platforming this is not. And when it comes to getting past some of these sequences, you'd have a better chance trying to throw a cue ball up the asshole of a stampeding rhino. Don't try that, by the way.
Man.
The second component to Catwoman is the combat. And this might also be the only beat 'em up I've ever played where the face buttons do absolutely nothing. Almost every combat attack is controlled with the right thumbstick, and not by pressing it, but by moving it in different directions depending on where you're trying to hit. You know why barely any games have used this control scheme? I'll tell you, because it's fucking stupid. I mean, just try to think of the last beat 'em up you've ever played, right? Where the A, B, X, and Y buttons do absolutely nothing. These buttons are about as useful here as double D tits on a nun. And again, it's kind of ironic because going back to Alien Resurrection, Argonaut games were downright revolutionary in the way that they were one of the first people to ever include the now standard control scheme of using the left thumbstick to move and strafe and the right to turn and aim. So I don't know if this was them again trying to do something entirely new and different, but like I said, I can honestly say I can't think of any other game where combat is relegated entirely to the right thumbstick. If you're standing still and pressing the thumbstick, Patience is going to crack out a whip which you can then use to disarm enemies and also pick up smaller items like bottles and other various pieces of trash to launch back into someone's face. But if you're crouching, done by holding down that left trigger, you can then pull off various acrobatic kicks and moves. Combat in this game is almost entirely against cops and security guards, people who are basically just minding their own business, and reacting as you'd expect when some crazy bitch in a skimpy outfit starts running through their workplace. I mean look, if I was a cop and someone ran through an area I was patrolling, I'd probably freak out too. My point is that you're not always fighting bad guys, and this is not a super violent video game where you're going to be snapping people's necks or ripping their dicks off. In fact, the game even makes a point of showing people surviving a fall if you knock them off a high railing or some kind of ledge. You literally get this little cinematic showing them getting back to their feet all dazed and confused, questioning their life choices and wondering why they bother to even go on living when the pain of existing is just so unbearable. And that's really the core of Catwoman's combat, is just kind of knocking people into things. Into piles of cardboard boxes, into explosive barrels. How they're surviving, that's anyone's guess. But more importantly, knocking them into things to incapacitate them. Like into vents, through windows, into dumpsters, storage crates, vats of Mountain Dew, or down elevator shafts. And again, how they survive that is anyone's guess. Or how about this one, knocking someone into like a big pile of manure or something?
Manure! I hate manure! Ah!
It's actually kind of hilarious how this looks sometimes. I mean, the way these guys float into a dumpster or a pile of trash like they're on the goddamn moon. You often run into a room, then a bunch of people come in to beat the crap out of you, and it's really just a matter of knocking these people into these preset objects until you've cleared the entire room out. Oh yeah, and they have to be standing right in front of these things at just the right angle or else it's not going to trigger properly. And if there's nothing to incapacitate them, they often just seem to throw their hands up in defeat and hide in a defensive position like frightened bunnies. There's no combos, there's no block button, it's just a matter of spamming that thumbstick in every direction to keep these assholes at bay. Occasionally there might be someone with a gun, which does get really annoying, but that's about all there is to it. And is that again supposed to be ironic? Like how cats are always constantly knocking over vases and other breakable objects? You can buy upgrades and unlock all of these new moves, most of which just involve another combination of thumbstick moves to use, but there's not really any point to any of it, because kicking someone into a trash can has a better effect. It's just incredibly janky and sloppy stuff, and honestly, one of the worst combat systems I think I've ever experienced. Fuck you! I mean, look at this. Look how slowly she gets back up whenever she's knocked on her ass. I mean, she moves with all the grace and speed of a feline that's just come back from the vet and is still doped up on pain meds. Throughout each stage, you can find your cat, Midnight, hiding in a vent, and freeing him gives you 9 revives, which is supposed to prevent you from having to start at an old checkpoint or something, but I think I honestly used this maybe once in the entire game. Those upgrades are supposed to give the combat more depth, I suppose, but they really just highlight how undercooked the whole mechanics are. Like there's a pose move, right? Where you stand seductively in front of someone for some reason. And I don't even know what the point of this one is, because after that pose stops, they just go back to punching me in the face anyway. The disarming move also seems kind of pointless, because after you yank a gun from someone's hand, they just go and pick the gun up a few seconds later anyway. There's also like a rage mode called domination mode, and again, I have no idea what the point of this one is either. The screen looks like it's covered in cat piss and everything goes all slow motion, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't seem to increase the damage you do or even the speed you move. Plus, it's also constantly draining your health points or diamond points. Yeah, the health bar for some reason is a giant meter of diamonds. I mean, what's the go with that? So this one's actually detrimental in the long run because it's killing you slowly, which is a great idea. It's a good mechanic, I guess, if you get sick of playing a really bad game at normal speed though, and instead want to play a really bad game at slow speed. The boss fights in this are also hilariously bad, and pretty much all of them just involve avoiding the boss and throwing pieces of junk at them from a distance. The first real boss in the game is Sharon Stone's character, though I can't even tell if it's actually supposed to be modeled off her or not. I mean, who can tell? And it actually caught me off guard here how quickly she beat the furballs out of me. At one point, she's even able to pull off this combo, which I can't even seem to avoid, because yeah, that's fair. And how pathetic too, man, our big bad heroine having her shit pushed in by a woman wearing a nightie. I'll admit though, that's kind of a fantasy of mine. This character also serves as the final boss for the game, which unsurprisingly yet again just requires you to throw a heap of crap at her till she runs out of health. Only difference is during the second half of the fight, you're also being shot at by a chopper, so you've got to contend with that at the same time. That whole last level is really the culmination of every horrible gameplay element all rolled up into one. Almost every single enemy at this point has a gun, and they can also do this really annoying thing where you're pinned from behind and then have to fend people off from both sides. After some utterly horrible platforming, there's another section where you're being shot at without any indication of how you're supposed to get out of there. And if you take a single shot here, you end up getting stun locked and can't even move.
Oh, shit!
And it's a fitting final trial for a game that's really comparable to having your toenails pulled out the root. When the whole thing came to an end, I was filled with two emotions. Number one, instant regret for having wasted the last 2 hours of my life playing this thing. Number two, also tangible relief, knowing I never have to play this thing ever again. Deep down, I am a glutton for punishment, and there is always something strangely fun about playing a game this bad, but the key word here is bad. Don't let that distract you from the main takeaway you should have from this video. You want to know what the absolute scariest thing is though, is that there's actually people out there who gave this thing positive reviews back in the day. Now, I don't want to make fun of people for having a different opinion to me, and Lord knows I've had my fair share of bad takes, but I do question the eyesight and general intelligence of anyone giving this thing praise. Even for the time, this was just a dreadful game. I mean, in 2004 alone, we had GTA San Andreas, Chronicles of Riddick, and just on the Xbox alone, Fable and Halo 2. If anything, that makes Catwoman's fault stick out even more. There's not really been too many Catwoman appearances in video games either before or after this, and I think the Catwoman content in the Arkham games is about the best set it's ever gotten. Seemed to capture the character pretty well, especially when it came to the movement and the combat, but also just the writing, making her a good mix of seeming believably capable, along with being complete Kuma bait.
I don't think so.
And there is novelty in bad games being appealing in some kind of sexual aspect. I mean, I've played enough of those kind of games to make that statement, let me tell you. But Catwoman, though, isn't one of those instances. Yeah, I know, that ain't the most startling revelation, and you're finishing this video knowing what you already knew going in. But still, it's better than Hunt Down the Freeman.
No, not again.
Alright, so thanks for sticking around, and let me tell you about my sponsor for this video, Raycon. Co-founded by R&B singer Ray J, Raycon makes some of the best and most affordable wireless everyday earbuds on the market. I use mine mostly when working out because I don't really want to have a pair of chunky headphones on my head when I'm trying to train at the gym. Or even sometimes when I'm just getting dinner sorted, I can pop them in and listen to a podcast while I'm in the kitchen. They're small and easy to stick in your ears and they connect instantly to your devices, not to mention they're half the price of other premium brands. Better than that, they also fit comfortably in your ears while you happen to be wearing uncomfortable gaming replica. Christmas is coming up real soon, and with free shipping, these things would make an awesome gift. They come in 5 stylish colours, so you can even pick the one that works best for whoever you want to give it to. And I'd never promote something I don't personally use and support, so if you want to get 15% off your next order store-wide, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/gman and use that code HOLIDAY at checkout. Yeah, do it.